adaptive, mobile, actionable architectures, which is the common thread or the main sense of instability the project selected for the exhibition pursues? And is it possible to transpose the idea of instability into economical, social, geopolitical frameworks or contexts?
Yeah, I would maybe rethink the words instability. It's really not about instability. It's about mobility, and it's about adaptability and operability and transformation. The way that the project is conceived is that architecture, what we normally think of as stable and rooted to the ground, is actually more vulnerable when static. So if we can conceive of an architecture that can receive transformation, that can maybe move out of the way of danger, that could potentially adapt to the environment and be very alive, then it has a chance of resisting obsolescence and destruction. So actually it extends the life of a building.
So flexibility and, in this sense, instability as the key in order to be related to the context itself, maybe. So what kind of strategies of interactivity should architecture contemplate in addition to the movement itself?
Well, it's a very big question about how we build. You know, when we build buildings, they're expensive, they take a long time to conceive and execute, and by the time you're finished, already the program is a couple of steps away. So how do we design for a future that we can't predict? And this is one of the key questions, really, that's rooted in the show. And we want architects to really consider this period that we are of this tremendous change that's happening faster than we can even contemplate. How could architecture conceive of itself in a way that it doesn't become irrelevant, right? And that it helps to solve problems rather than produces more problems for people. You know, we don't want to see cities in rubble, right? Of course, and we can't change maybe, you know, political actions that are above us. But buildings can be more resilient. They could be less built like fortresses and more supple, you know, that they can actually take and resist change. And this is, you know, even earthquakes and floods, and, you know, buildings can, you know, be above floods. Buildings can resist the wind by bending to the wind. So it's a different way of thinking about the notions of, you know, the Vitruvian stability and those kinds of ideals that we think about in architecture. Much more that you know, resistance comes from, or resilience comes from adaptability rather than resistance.
In this sense, there is, I think, in most of the project, an idea of openness somehow. So the ability of the building to be open to modifications themselves. So I'm talking about daily uses, for example. So there is always something that goes beyond the functions or the aesthetic, of course. So there is an open dimension that let people and visitors modify and inhabit that place. Is there, for example, a building that was imagined or designed in a way, also thinking about his dimension of flexibility and openness, and then after the realization, the construction, that open space changed in a way that wasn't imagined or wasn't predicted during the design phase, for example?
Well, I think most buildings are used in a different way than they're intended to be used. So I think the unpredictability is sort of built into architecture. But on the first part of your question, the building that is featured in this exhibition, the Fun Palace by Cedric Price, was really the project that sparked a lot of thinking after the war about just a framework, for a space that has a kit of parts that can be translated and changed and moved and replaced. And some of the work that's shown here. And the shed, which was our project that was very much sparked by the Fun Palace. So how do you build for this future? And in both cases, there's a infrastructure. It's an architecture of infrastructure. So you have your protection from the rain, you have your structure, you have your environmental conditioning, you have your electrical power, you have everything that you need really for a building, but the space isn't entirely defined. But at the same time, it's not generic, and I think this is really the key. So an architecture of distinction that is able to take on different forms, is able to adapt to all different and support different kinds of productions and shows and uses, but still has that character of being flexible, of changing suits, changing outfits, and not being this inert image.
You mentioned the obsolescence, in a sense, of the building, so it's something that goes beyond the end of life of the building, related to the functions, and it stays in. It able to be open to different also uses in different times. For example, the dialogue between the past and present or future, and meaning the historical and contemporary heritage is, I think, a very interesting key to take in consideration while designing a project. In particular, for the city of Rome, for example, is something that is a dialogue that we need to think about. So, what balance, what compromise should architecture depict, talking about the relationship between past heritage and the need of contemporary architecture?
Yeah, this is probably a huge problem that, just to put it into perspective, looking at it from today, there's a lot of history going back in Rome. But, in a couple of 100 years, this will be part of that history. So you are really just a moment in the cycle of the history of a city. And so the contribution is one layer of contributions, and histories build up. And the problem with so many histories and such a long duration is that there becomes a paralysis, right? There's less and less land, there's everything is protected, and it's a dilemma. So of course we have to preserve heritage. It's very, very important to do that. And the importance of translating buildings, transforming buildings in a way that's sensitive to its history, but also can breathe life into buildings that are, set in formaldehyde and become museums. So I don't believe in that. But giving life to a building that makes it continue to have a function, even if it's a different function, is very important. I think when we think forward, building buildings that have that some kind of flexibility in mind. Of course, you can't imagine what the future will be like, but have that kind of infrastructure, have the strength, to build higher if needed, the strength to have more power, right, if needed, and that basically doesn't close off possibilities. That's very important. I think that part of the problem is, when we have historic cities, we build out into the suburbs and we just keep building and building and building, and the loss of the city. So, a city is something that is an organism, and it has to do with so many different vital parts of that organism to make it breathe and live, and support, work and life and education and culture and all of those things that it has to do. So growing responsibly, proportionally, is very, very important. There are just so many things. You can build up, you can build out. But we're a growing, culture, and most populations in the world are going to grow. Cities are going to grow. So we have to think about how that works. And especially for cities, beautiful old cities, how do we do that without making them museums and without making them just like tourist traps?
So mostly you also replied to the next question, but it was, which is the city of the future, which is the vision of the future city, in particular Rome. In your opinion, you already mentioned a lot of strategies and topics that for sure are going to be related to this topic, to this idea of the vision of the future city.
Yeah. Well, I think architects have to be involved, and developers who are interested in growth and also in profit, have to really work with architects and planners with a vision that has to do with all of these moving parts. You can't just add another building and add another building and add another development and another one. Of course, and it's more than transportation, it's more than the logistics of a city. It has to do with the soul of a city. And usually cities can't happen overnight, they happen over time. And the best cities, are ones that evolve naturally, organically. And I think that's what has to do. You have to plant a seed for something to grow organically and not just produce a new city and have it instantaneously there.
And how the role of the architect changes, and which are the main topics we should focus on today?
The main topics that...
The main topics we should focus on as architects related to our role and how it changed over time, for example.
Yeah. I think architects are very often the victims of a system that's already there. We plug into it. So there are clients, there are visions of clients, there are all the professionals around an architectural project. There's the role of the city administration. There's the role of all the consultants and engineers and everyone that you need to actually put a serious urban project together. I think the role of the architect as a kind of conductor or a film director, has to provide the big vision, and the vision has to be smart and sensible, of course, but you have to get everybody moving in the direction of that vision in order to be successful, because you can be stopped along the way anywhere. People are afraid of change. City administrators are afraid of change as well. So there are many mixed objectives that you have to keep in mind, when doing work in urban contexts. So your own ideas, your own vision, but also what's healthy for the city. What is the administration thinking could be healthy, which is usually economic. So how could you blend in an economic notion with potentially a social idea, and an aesthetic idea as well. And then the residents of a city, the citizens of a city, also should have a voice in this and shouldn't just be the receivers. So there's an opportunity to have a dialogue back and forth. But in the end, I truly believe in expertise. There's too much sort of given over to everybody but architects. And I also think city architects that are peers, that work on behalf of the health of the city and the beauty of a city is very, very important. Not all cities have city architects. So I think that, and that could also protect visions that are maybe too provocative and too out there for everyone to just accept. So it's a kind of buffer, a translator, from the modality of an architect to the to what has to happen politically to make things happen.
For sure, also architecture is a political act in a sense that is related to citizens and what we call 𝗘𝗶𝗶𝗇𝗃. So in this sense, our role is for sure related to this kind of topics, for sure.
It's always political, I think. Architecture has to be, because otherwise we're designing for ourselves, and and it changes nothing, you know. I think that in the end, the question, though, of sitting at the table with people in power, being able to help formulate a brief, you know, rather than just receive a brief, being there to defend a building when what's in mind is to simplify something, you know, to dumb it down or to make it less expensive, to be there to defend it and to also be able to find a solution that satisfies the problems. So all too often architects are taken out of the picture too early. So I would advocate for architects to sit at the table, be there always at the table, and you know, we're perfectly capable of making hard decisions, and but always with the objective of the best kind of solution for, you know, for the city and for the public.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm here as Order of Architects of Rome. I will kindly ask you to write down a very short dedication to Roman architects, if you would like to. Thank you very much.
Okay, I think I have to do this in privacy. Is this caught on camera? Okay. Okay. Maybe something of wisdom or not. Okay.